the matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA096.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
Boom. Taylor, we are back on a sunny, beautiful Wednesday morning. How are you doing?
It's good. I'm assuming it's sunny and beautiful. How are you? I was talking to my sister in Austin, and it looks hot as balls and
I don't.
humid.
So here's the thing. I'm in Dallas, obviously, and Dallas is typically a few degrees cooler than Austin is always.
That's
And
nice.
so it is not terrible, but I'm assuming it will be when I get home later today.
Yeah. Gross. Remember when you got home that one time and your entire cowboy pool was evaporated?
It wasn't evaporated. I was such an idiot. You can't evaporate
Oh,
700 gallons in like a couple of days.
because I was like, that's crazy. But did it have a hole
Yeah,
in it?
yeah, it had a hole in it,
That's
and
funny.
it happened over and over again. And so I refilled it because I'm an idiot and I thought it would have evaporated. So I refilled it, and it was gone the next morning. And I was like, "Wow, that was like $300 worth of water just gone."
Oh my God, that's so funny. Well, good to
Terrible.
know.
Yeah, yeah.
Hilarious. You're so funny.
Um, well, welcome to Doing to Fail. I'm Forrest, joined here by Taylor. We're going to be covering a story that Taylor is going to make me guess that has Doom to Fail components to it.
Cool. Yeah, let me get my thing. So okay. I oh, I lost your face. I was going to well, I started reading a book on Alexander the Great, and then I got an email that Dan Carlin started his Alexander the Great series. So I was like, who am I to do this before I know how to pronounce everything via Dan Carlin?
It's fair.
So yeah, I'm not gonna be an asshole and not do that. So
You don't want to
I
upstage him, is what you didn't want to do.
for real. Yeah, no, I'm gonna learn how to say all sorts of things. And like already in the book I was reading, they were saying Macedonian, which I know is Macedonian, so like, come on. Ridiculous.
Taylor, are you sure about that?
Yeah, I'm sure whatever Dan Carlin says.
Okay, got
So I was like, forget it. I'm gonna wait on that. And then next week I am actually gonna start a four-part series that I'm very excited about that I'll tell you about next week. But in the meantime, I have a casual series. So this is just like some like a fun thing that has like a thread and like maybe I'll do a couple more, maybe I won't, I don't know. But I'm gonna do a series on bad presidents and guess who I'm gonna start with? I can tell you he's an early one.
it. Garfield?
No, he's number seven.
I
Hope that's
don't
easier.
know.
It's Andrew Jackson.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
So let's talk about this asshole, Andrew Jackson.
He's a yeoman.
So the what?
He's a yeoman.
A what?
Isn't he a yeoman? Isn't he like a farmer?
No.
Oh, okay. I'm thinking about the wrong one.
No, he was a plantation owner. So like he didn't do any farming.
He wasn't Lincoln's VP, was he?
No, this is way before. Lincoln's like 17. He's seven.
Got it. Okay. Carry on.
So there's a lot of so many podcasts on Andrew Jackson, but I listened to two like random ones that I found, one called Asshole Court and one called Ranking the US Presidents. And the facts are different kind of in both. Like it's kind of like some of them are they tell kind of different stories. But one thing that they did in each of them that like pulled out and kind of really talked about what an asshole Andrew Jackson is. Asshole court, they literally looked at the dictionary definition of a white supremacist, and you could like put a picture of Andrew Jackson next to it.
What is the
The
definition?
I will tell you, I have it right now. It is the belief that white people constitute a superior race and should therefore dominate society, typically to the exclusion or detriment of other racial and ethnic groups. So that's Andrew Jackson in a nutshell. And then also the other one, ranking the presidents, called him the first really pro-slavery president.
That's not
So
good.
not good. These are the things that are good. That's a little bit of context. Another thing is when we first started doing this podcast and we were like focusing on relationships that were doomed to fail, I definitely was looking up things that were like, what are some famous historical relationships that were doomed? And Andrew Jackson and his wife Rachel are always on that list. And I was just like, I don't really want him to be lucky in love. So, meh, you know. So I'll tell you a little bit about what that looks like in a little bit. So Andrew Jackson, the seventh president of the United States, was born on March 15th, 1767. He was born in the United States, but his parents were Irish immigrants, and he had two older brothers that were born in Ireland and then came to America. His his parents' names were Andrew Jackson and Elizabeth Hutchinson. His mom like really hated the British, like hated them. So she really wanted her sons to be like patriots and like in the Revolutionary War. His dad died in a logging accident at the age of 29, 3 weeks before Andrew Jackson was born, and he never met him. Do you know what other president's dad died before they were born?
Obama's?
Bill Clinton.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, Bill Clinton's last name, Clinton, is the name of his mom's like remarriage, but Bill Clinton's dad, Jefferson Blythe, died in a car accident 3 months before Bill was born.
Wait, so his name was supposed to be Bill Blythe?
Yeah,
Doesn't have the same ring to it. It's weird.
I know, isn't that wild? It just like Clinton just feels like the thing. Um, so Jackson had two older brothers, Hugh and Robert, and the two older brothers went off to the Revolutionary War. During the war, Hugh dies of heat exhaustion, which like sounds terrible. And so Elizabeth sent Andrew. So now all of her sons are in the war. In April 1781, Andrew's just 14, and him and his brother get captured by the British. So he's like really young when he's going through this, like he's like in the war. And there's a story where a British soldier tries to make Andrew polish his boots and he says no. So he slashes him with like a sword or a knife or something, and Andrew Jackson will have a scar on his side forever from that encounter.
How is it that the British are like the villain in everything?
This is why. This is 100% why.
It's so bad.
Yeah. So, I mean, like they're the villain because of the Revolutionary War. That's why we make them the villain and everything.
They
So
they were horrible to everybody. They were horrible to India. They were horrible to like. I mean,
that's true. I mean, yeah,
they're
it's like
always the villain.
deserved. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, I
Well,
bought a
they
book
did
this week
they
on the,
they did help us out with the whole Hitler thing. So I guess they get some praise.
yes. I feel like later we get into that when they're like, and that's when their empire also dissolves. So, it happens. So, um, while he's captured, he's obviously things aren't great. He gets smallpox. It's like they like are lose a bunch of weight. Him and his brother are both really, really sick. His mother negotiates to get them back in like a prisoner exchange, and they have to walk home, and it's like 40 miles and terrible. And by the time they get home, his brother got home like just in time to die there. So Andrew's brother dies at home, and his mom was so sad, but she like liked nursing the kids, so she decided to become a nurse in a cholera hospital. And of course, she gets cholera and dies like right away. So Andrew Jackson is an orphan at around 14 years old. So that sucks. It's a pretty rough childhood. You've already like been to war and back and your whole family died
At 14,
at 14. So this is also the time when like a 14-year-old is like can be on their own. Like I don't really know like
I
what he
don't
did. He like
think I don't think that's. I know that that's the custom, but I don't think that's good.
no, 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 I don't think so either. Like what are you supposed to do? So during his life, he's going to be described as like very violent. He takes things really personally. He's very religious in like a way that he's like manifest destiny. God made this space for white people. Like that's sort of his vibe. But after he's 14, he like becomes like yada yada yada, he becomes a lawyer. So it's one of those things like you don't have to go to law school, you just have to like
Yeah,
study
yeah.
under someone or whatever. So he's a, a lawyer, and he starts to do kind of some like interesting like anecdotes from his young life. He is in several duels. His first duel is with a man named Waitstill Avery, and they both end up shooting up into the air. So like duels are still a thing, but they're like illegal in some places and like legal in others, and like it's a whole thing. But he does get in his first duel during this time. Also, as soon as he gets a little bit of money, guess what he buys?
A slave.
Indeed, he does. The first thing he does when he gets a little bit of money is he buys a person. It's a woman who's about his age. And some of the things I listen to, there's the like you're a person of your times, which like I hear that argument, but also I counter with the argument that of the founding fathers, Ben Franklin, John Adams, Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, Thomas Paine, and Gouverneur Morris were all outspoken abolitionists. So it's not like everyone was doing it. Not
I
everyone was
was
doing it.
I was thinking about how dealing with people and the nuances and complexities of like of what they think about and feelings, all that stuff is like the worst part of like just any kind of dynamic I'm in. And I'm like the thought of buying a person, never mind the moral objections to it, it just sounds like a fucking pain in the ass.
Just like having another person to deal with.
It's like, oh God, now I gotta deal with this thing over here. Like it's just like, yeah.
That's so funny. You're so funny. Um, so so he is like, and even like I also said before, like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, they owned slaves. They were not nice to their enslaved people. Um, and but they wrote about how it should end. They wrote about it being like a bad practice, but they still didn't stop it because they were like, yeah, but then I wouldn't make any money, you know.
Yeah, makes sense.
So so they had that and then but whatever. Andrew Jackson was like super excited to be able to start enslaving people. He becomes a judge, and he's living at this house of an older widow, which also I think is wild because like you're like renting a room, but you have an enslaved person. Like, do they live? Where do they live?
That's what I
I
don't get.
remember
That's why I don't understand about the whole like you have a person. Like I don't. Do you
they
take
said to
them with you to like the store? Like do you like?
I think yes, it's like it's really bad.
It's really strange.
Yeah, it's really strange. And so I think that yeah, there's another story that I didn't put in my outline, but like where like when he was president, he had an enslaved person just like sleep next to his bed on the floor in case he needed anything in the middle of the night. Like wild.
Again, that's harder than not having him there.
Yeah, I agree. So but he's living in this house and he meets the daughter of the widow. Her name is Rachel. Rachel is married to someone else and her husband is like a 4 out of 10. He's like not a great guy. And eventually they do get separated and they get divorced. But before they're divorced, Rachel and Andrew Jackson are essentially living together. So like they fall in love, they're living together. So she gets accused of bigamy because she's like obviously living with someone else while she's married to someone else. And it's like pretty scandalous, and it will always be kind of something that like hangs over him as like a scandal. But he marries Rachel, they buy a plantation, and they start to like live their life. They're never going to have any kids, but they, start their life together. They start like enslaving more people. Eventually, he will own about 150 enslaved people on his plantations. So now Andrew Jackson is getting into politics, and this could be 1,000 different episodes, but I'm just gonna like zoom us through it. But he loves states' rights. He doesn't want any federal power. That's like his like big thing. He's part of the Democratic Republican Party, which like I do not understand. This is when people are like, I'm a Jeffersonian Democrat, or I'm a Whig, or I'm a blah blah blah, and it's like a little bit confusing, like what exactly that means or how we could translate it to today. But he definitely like hates a national bank. He wants everything to be like stateside. Um, he goes to Congress for a little bit, but only for like half a term, and then he goes back to becoming a judge. He gets in another duel with the Tennessee governor, John Seaver, because Seaver had insulted Rachel. She's like an easy target in this because they're like, oh, your wife was married to someone else when you met her, you know?
All right.
So this is going to come up again and again. So he is living in Tennessee. They have their
Shouldn't they be making
plantation.
fun of the husband who got his wife stolen?
No, because it's always the woman's fault.
Huh.
So he's
Interesting.
living in Tennessee, and he, is also like a thing to note. He's like not a kind enslaver. He at one point one person runs away and he offers $10 per 100 lashes up to 300 that anyone's willing to give him, which essentially would have killed that person. So he basically is like, I'll give someone $30 to kill this enslaved person who ran away from me. So
That's $3,000.
$300?
$10
300.
per lash for 300
No, no, no,
lashes.
per 100 lashes. $10 per
Oh,
100.
oh, got it. Okay.
Yeah. So, um, something happens in 1805 where it's like kind of a complicated story that has to do with like betting on horses, but this feels like a very like kind of silly, gentlemanly back and forth between him and this man named Charles Dickinson. So they're like mad at each other because of money and because of like horse racing and like something. And they're just like sending insults to each other. Like Dickinson writes in the paper that Andrew Jackson is, quote, a worthless scoundrel, a poltroon, and a coward. And I looked up poltroon and it just means coward. So he just said coward twice. But he's like, they're like spewing insults back and forth. They're mad about money. They're mad about a thing. The story is like long and dumb, but in the end, um, Andrew Jackson blames Charles Dickinson for talking shit about Rachel. Dickinson says if he did talk shit about her, he was drunk and he apologized. But then someone else like got like meddled in and there was like a cane involved. Everybody's fighting. So these guys decide to duel again. So this is like at least his third duel, if not more than that. And dueling was illegal in Tennessee, where Andrew Jackson lived. So they went to Kentucky on May 30th, 1806. And something else happened where there was like a coin toss, and they set fire quicker than they were supposed to. But Dickinson shoots and he hits Andrew Jackson in the chest, and the bullet lands in his heart, and it will be there forever. He doesn't die, but he will always have a bullet in his heart.
Taylor, if I was born at this time, I somebody should have just fucking thrown me off a cliff. Like I never would have survived. This guy's been to war, has face slashed by he's 14. He's shooting guns at each other, like just
I
standing in
know.
front. It's just like crazy. They're crazy
It's
people.
it's so dangerous to be alive. Yeah, and this is like it's like instead of just like yelling at someone, you're like, okay, now we're gonna duel. I'm gonna shoot you. Bananas.
I mean, in hindsight, if you think like the guy owns slaves and is hitting them, it's like he's letting people shoot guns at himself. So like that's how much regard he has for his own life, not just for somebody else's.
Exactly. Exactly. So he so something happens and they say like we're gonna shoot at the same time, and so Jackson gets shot, and then the rules are if you shoot someone, you have to stand still and let them have a chance to shoot you, which also is like a rule I would not abide by. I would run away. So the Jackson shoots Dickinson and kills him. So he does kill his like potentially first person he ever killed in a duel in 1806. And like some people are like that is dumb and it kind of like tarnishes his reputation, but like not enough that he's not like going to be president. You know what I mean? Um, he also during this time becomes friends with Aaron Burr, who obviously also famously was in a duel. And Aaron Burr like comes over and they try to invade Florida together in a way that is like a shenanigans that we could talk about later. But basically also during this time, the Spanish owned Florida, and that's going to be a big part of it as well.
He sounds like every like very confident drunk frat guy I knew in college.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Like, so now Andrew Jackson was in the military. He's going to get called back into the military. It's the War of 1812. There's a lot of like little wars, and we should talk about the War of 1812 and like a whole thing. Like Washington, D.C. burns down. Dolly Madison saves that famous portrait of George Washington from the White House. And long story short, there are a couple little tiny wars inside of the War of 1812. There's one called the Creek War, where Andrew Jackson will get shot again in the shoulder, not in the battle, but because of like a dispute over honor. But he will survive that one as well. But like, you're being shot too much, sir. Um, so during the Creek War, some native tribes were aligning with the British because they were like trying to stop the United States from like taking all of their land, and they wanted to be recognized as like sovereign nations within like the land the United States was trying to take over. One tribe that he had a skirmish with was the Red Sticks. He essentially was like a scorched earth policy. He killed all of them, women, children, everyone. Like his troops went in and like destroyed the Red Sticks because they were aligning with the British. He also brings troops down to New Orleans and you'll remember that the Creole people are there, and they're French from Canada. And he institutes martial law immediately in New Orleans and like kind of takes over. And he kicks all the French people out and like takes control of New Orleans. And he gets criticized for having martial law a little bit like too heavy-handed, you know? He's like creating all these little bands of people and like doing all this stuff.
I mean, I will say so far, nothing about what you've said, it all aligns.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
all his behavior and the things that he's done, it's like, oh yeah, that's what that person would do.
Yep, exactly. Exactly. So he does at this point create a little army of like volunteers, and he paid everyone the same base no matter what race they were, which is great. Very nice. But he then another little war during this time is the Seminole War. He really hates Native Americans, and he really wants them to move west. He creates a bunch of treaties that are all kind of bullshit. So like the whole history of this is like treaties that like we were never going to abide by. You know, they
You
were
know,
always going to push people west.
real quick, do you know what other person you dislike also did that?
Who?
So Henry Ford, one of the ways that he became like famous for workers' rights was because he upped the price per day of a worker to $5, and everybody, regardless of race, made
Hmm.
$5. And that was like the first time that ever happened. I just listened to a podcast about that, and I was like, huh, it's weird.
Interesting. And I feel like maybe it's just like, uh, yeah, I wonder what that's about. You know, just like I need workers and whatever, you know? Um,
Yeah, I forgot what it was. It was oh God, that famous boxer was trying to buy like a Ford factory in or a Ford whatever. Doesn't I'm derailing. Go ahead, keep going.
no, 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 but I understand. So, okay, in the middle of this, um, oh, so he does also get investigated by Congress in 1819 because he essentially, on his own, went into Florida and fought the Spanish. And they were like, "You're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to like wait for Congress to declare war." But they let him off. But he was like, so people in DC like knew him
It's kind of
in the middle
badass.
of, yeah, yeah. So, oh my God, the Mid-Journey pictures that I made of Andrew Jackson are unhinged. He's like wild on a horse. Like I can't wait to show you. It's crazy. In the middle of this, do you remember this? That he meets a ghost, the Bell Witch.
No.
So last podcast on the left did an
I
episode
know.
on the
I
Bell
never
Witch.
listened to the Bell Witch one.
So
I know what you're talking about.
it's silly, you know, it's like a house that like a family said that like a woman was there. And at one point Andrew Jackson comes and Henry goes, the ghost looks at Andrew Jackson and says, "First of all, fuck you," which I thought was really funny. But there's this I read this hilarious, definitely not true encounter that like made the ghost a lot more palpable. It was like knocking and like whatever. But in the story that I read, they said that Andrew Jackson was like going towards the house to like see if he could help. And then the carriage he was in just like totally stopped. And then they got out of the carriage and Andrew Jackson was like, "What were we talking about when the carriage stopped?" And they were like, "We were talking about the witch." So he was like, "Did she hear us?" And then from the bushes, they heard someone say, "Right, you are, General. Now I'll let the wagon move on. Farewell. I'll see you tonight." So like the witch said that from like the bushes, and they went to the house. And then when they got there, he kind of got in a gunfight with the witch, and he was like, "I'm gonna shoot you," which is like, I don't think you can shoot a ghost. I don't
Again,
know.
it this all sounds like it aligns with the kind of behavior you've described so far. He
Yeah,
sounds like a crazy person.
he's a crazy person. Like you can't shoot a ghost,
He's a
sir.
14-year-old orphan. Like this is what happens.
So, um, that's hilarious and like whatever like that, but he was definitely there, whatever happened, whether or not he tried to shoot the ghost, don't do that. I recommend not shooting ghosts. So now he becomes governor of Florida and he wants to run
Of
for
course.
president, of course. um he the presidency was there were like several people running for president in this year that he ran the first time, and it ended up no one got all the electoral votes, and it went to Congress and it ends up with John Quincy Adams becoming president. So he goes back to Florida. He's there for a little bit, and then he runs for president again. So when he runs for president again, it's like very, very stressful for Rachel. They break up the affair and all this stuff all the time. They also um, have like these things called the coffin handbills, which are like flyers that say Andrew Jackson is a murderer. Like he's murdered this many people during all these things, and like literally pictures of coffins on them, being like he's crazy. Like let's not let him be president. But he does win, and right after he wins, Rachel dies. She gets really sick, and from the stress, and she dies. So that's
Sounds
something
like good
where,
riddance.
uh, I mean, he loved her. It's just that like it was always hanging over his head.
No, yeah.
You know? So she dies and he's gonna be sad about that forever. Andrew Jackson also is going to win 2 terms. So the next two-termer will be Abe Lincoln. So between 7 and 17, everyone will only have 1 term, if that makes sense. Or
Yeah.
16th, whatever. So a couple things that he did before we get to the big thing, and there's so many things that we could like um go into like individually on here. But uh let's do a couple things. So Andrew Jackson is again like a states' rights guy. He used the veto more times than anyone had done before in all of history combined. And the things that he vetoed were like state things, where like Indiana needed roads and Maryland needed a bridge. And he was like, no, 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 no.
Why did he
Like,
want to be president when he didn't believe in the rights of the federal government?
it's a good question. I have no idea.
Just stay governor of Florida. That's like the perfect spot to be.
Exactly. Exactly. He hates the national bank. So Hamilton had like made a national bank, and then like this is when it came up for like like certification or whatever, and he vetoed that as well. There's going to be a lot and like a little bit of like a panic in like 1837. So like and the economy is not going to do well. Um, there's an affair that it's not an affair, but it's called the Eaton affair, where the Secretary of War's wife Margaret was being accused of being like promiscuous, and that reminded him of all the accusations against Rachel. So he defended her and fired members of the cabinet who were like making fun of this woman. And one person that kind of stepped up and took his side was Martin Van Buren, and he will become the vice president and then become president. So that's kind of his path, was like while Andrew Jackson was busy being like incensed that this woman's honor was being questioned, Martin Van Buren was like, yeah, sir, this is totally normal. And
It's
like became,
literally how we're gonna get our next vice president.
yeah, exactly. Oh, all the scandals are totally normal, sir. Um, so um he's a little bit of international stuff. He does try to get some of the money back from the ships that were lost in the Napoleonic Wars. So he tries to get money back from other countries. He does pay off the national debt, which is the only time that's ever happened. So
Seriously?
yeah.
Billy,
Um,
did you hear how by 2030, I think it was, the national debt of the United States will equate to every person and child owing $1 million?
it's hilarious. Like, what does that even mean?
What does that even mean?
Like, this is dumb. Like, sure, I owe you $1 billion. I'll pay you later.
It's crazy.
Whatever. Um, So he also is involved in Texas, how the Texas becomes the Texas Republic. The last day of Andrew Jackson's presidency, he will recognize the Republic of Texas as a country. And as far as like as slavery goes, while he's president, it's not like in any of his like bills or anything, but he does like at one point there's a newspaper for abolitionists, and he orders everyone who subscribes to it to have their name listed publicly, which is like dangerous and definitely a
Yeah.
threat, you know? Um, and there's more things that he did. So eventually, Andrew Jackson is going to get like attacked in his last term as president by a man who wants to kill him, and his like he tries to shoot him twice and the gun doesn't work, and Andrew Jackson's like trying to hit him with his cane. He's like old and like all these things are happening. So like people like he's just like living in this violent time. Eventually, Andrew Jackson obviously like does die of old age, essentially. Let me see. He dies in he dies in um 1845. So he'll die later, but one thing that I wanted to make sure that we mentioned while we were here is the big thing that he did, and do you know what that is?
Uh,
The big bad thing. There's so many bad things, but the big bad thing.
oh God. No.
It's the Indian Removal Act, aka the Trail of Tears.
That's a big one.
So I feel like we learn about the Trail of Tears in elementary school, you know, as a time when the Native Americans were forced to move west. And it was something that like wasn't 100% popular with like everyone in Congress, but like the act very, very narrowly um passed. But it was Andrew Jackson's. He wrote it. This is what he wanted. This is part of the like white people need to be in charge. We need more land so we can like have more plantations and like grow more shit. So we wanted to move west. The
We
Native
don't
Americans
need
are,
more land. There's so much freaking land.
there's so much land. Um, but so they wanted to move west, and in that there's people living there, obviously. And so all these Native American people are like, this is our country. Like we want to be like a nation. And so they would try to negotiate, but really at the end they like didn't. Um they were like, we need to get these people out of the east, move them as far west as possible, so that we can take over. So in some places, like there were obviously this is like the belief that like the Europeans are like a better nation. One like wild quote from Andrew Jackson is he says, quote, "What good man would prefer a country covered with forests and ranged by a few thousand savages to our extensive republic, studded with cities, towns, and prosperous farms, embellished with all the improvements which art can devise or industry execute, occupied by more than 12 million happy people and filled with all the blessings of liberty, civilization, and religion," end quote.
We
So like,
literally all chose when we went remote to move in the middle of nowhere so we can be
I
closer to
know
nature and further from
we yearn
cities.
we yearn for the forests.
I'm literally
We want to go
staring
back.
at there's not a single desktop backdrop that isn't landscape of nature versus like
1,000%.
street signs.
Everybody wanted that, Jackson. Now we're stuck trying to get back to it. So he also used like biblical narratives to be like, we need to go, we need to do this. And also like trying to if people didn't comply, like they would get killed. Another thing that I didn't realize as much as like I when you first hear it, I imagined so like some of the tribes like the Cherokee, the Choctaw, um and I always pictured when I was a kid like Native Americans dressed like typical Native Americans, like walking west. And then the Trail of Tears obviously is called that because they had to like walk really far, walk west. People died of exposure, starvation, all the things. It was terrible. But another thing that like I didn't realize is a lot of the people had already assimilated to Western culture. So there were like Cherokee people who were Christian, who, were going to like United States schools and like assimilating, and they made them leave too. So
Okay,
it wasn't
point
like
point number two: never never buy into the religion and the
of the oppressor.
mandates of the
Yeah.
oppressor.
Yeah.
Every person, oh god, sorry, I'm like having flashbacks right now. Growing up, like I had a
No.
lot of friends who were like Indian, like not Native American, but like from India,
Hmm.
and they were like crazy die-hard Christian. They would like preach to me, and I was like, dude, you're from you're one generation removed from like Gandhi's India. Like
Right.
this is literally just British fucking mindfuckery happening in your like weird.
Yeah.
Anyways,
No. Because I mean, they made them leave anyway, which is just like wild and like unbelievable. And so they were just there's a lot of like treaties that were not true, you know, and also like some of the treaties they would make with like different parts of the tribes. So they'd be like, make a small coalition, make a treaty, and then be like, oh, this is real. When they'd be like, not everybody agreed to that, you know? So they were doing a lot of like nefarious things. Some of the tribes obviously like did not want to go. And so there was like war and a lot of people died. A lot of the tribes would work with free or escaped enslaved people. But there's going to be a lot of wars, and thousands of people are going to die and move on and be forced west. And as we know, there is no more west you can go. They're just forced, to go into to reservations if they are, kept alive. And it definitely is one of those things that like has a lot of similarities to like, Manifest Destiny, Lebensraum, like we're the white people, we should be able to move and like take over. And so that's his like worst thing. And then when Andrew Jackson stops being president, I know Martin Van Buren makes sure that it's finished. So he's really like making sure that they finish the Trail of Tears, finish getting people out so that white people can continue to go and like safely move west.
so here's my I don't know this. I can't say this with any authority really, but
Hmm.
I will. There does seem to be some allusions to that, to like things like invading Iraq and like things like
Hmm.
we deserve it kind of a vibe of I don't know. The manifest destiny thing doesn't feel like it's totally gone.
No, absolutely not. I think you're absolutely right. Yeah. Which is so silly because like I know everything we talk about. I'm like, why do people keep hurting each other? It's so dumb. Like we're just all people. Like we could all have food and everything would be fine. You know? Like it's not there's no reason to do this. But we keep doing
Yeah.
it over and over again. Yeah. Silly.
Wait, so how
Silly,
old was he
silly,
when he
silly.
died?
He was old. Oh my God. The last portrait of him when he's old, he looks terrible, which is great. Um, he was 1845, 1967, or 45 minus 1767, 78. Pretty old. Pretty old. He
He
never
lived
remarried. Yeah.
he lived a crazy life.
A crazy, like violent life. Um, yeah. That's why he's always listed on these lists of like one of the craziest presidents, all of that, for
Um,
sure.
and it sounds like he was it sounds like he was uniquely violent and aggressive.
I think so. I definitely think so. And it was a time where like you were able to be a little bit violent because you were able to be like in all these big wars, and you were able to um be in duels and not like go to jail forever, which it feels like you should do if you are.
Like when your Oppo research includes just like print material of coffins,
Yeah, exactly.
he sounds like a fucking crazy guy. Like,
Yeah.
and like that's the thing. Like you're talking about. Hold on, I'm reading this thing. Jackson had a reputation for being short-tempered and violent, which terrified his opponents. Yeah, he did. He
Of
did.
course.
He
Yeah,
sounds he sounds really aggressive. He sounds like a very mean man.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Um, but also, again, putting things in context, like if you were orphaned at 14,
Yeah, and you have to like fend for yourself and like all these things. Like he wasn't, I mean, he probably wasn't gonna be like a happy guy, but still.
it's like you watch like documentaries of like people in prison, and it's like they'll kill somebody over like a piece of cornbread or something, and it's like
Yeah.
yeah, because like that's not normal social behavior, but if you're put in that environment, like I guess like that's how you adapt and evolve.
Yeah.
So it's not
So
good. I'm not saying I like it.
yeah, his circumstances definitely led him in like a really weird, bad direction.
He had a tendency to take things personally. Even if someone crossed him, he would often. Oh, sorry. If someone crossed him, he would often become obsessed with crushing them.
Cool. Totally normal. Imagine if he had Twitter. All the crazy things he might have spewed out in all caps.
I think we're I thought we've already seen that.
Yeah, imagine.
We've already
Uh,
seen that. Uh,
um, cool.
very
I just like reminding
interesting.
people about Andrew Jackson, and then there's a couple other ones. I mean, no president is all good, but there's a couple that are particularly bad. So I will pull from those lists in the next couple months and tell you a couple
I
more stories.
it's interesting. I was because if you're keeping track of this election cycle, so much of it is revolving around the economy and how people feel about the economy. And
Hmm.
I was listening to this one podcast with these two economic journalists or economy journalists, whatever, and the way they're kind of articulating is like, listen, like a president can do some things, but it will not ever it will rarely ever be deterministic of how you feel about the economy. The way you feel about the economy is so subjective towards like your socioeconomic status and the things that are impacting you
Hmm.
directly and I gotta when you're talking about like what's going on with like uh good presidents and bad presidents, it's like what even does that mean? Like what even does like a good what does a good president do? What does a bad president do? And like
Hmm.
now I think that we're thinking about like the economy as like a good president manages a good economy. But it's like, how much control do you have over that?
Yeah, I know. You really don't. Like you really, and it's not like you can turn it around or destroy it in like an hour.
You
Like it
can't. You
takes
can't.
like a
Yeah.
long time. It's not like a one thing. Like there's definitely like presidents can make decisions that are like good or bad subjectively, but like who knows? Like what does that mean for like everything?
And that was
And
the
like
entire point. Yeah.
yeah, like our
So
ridiculous national debt. Like who cares?
I mean, as long as I'm not directly responsible for it,
I mean, we kind of are because we're going to pay taxes on it forever, but like we're not going to pay it off.
it's fair. It's
Yeah.
fair. Well, Taylor, thank you for sharing.
You're
Anything you want to
welcome.
leave, tie us or end us on?
No, just thank you everyone for listening. Please tell your friends. Please give us a review so more people can find us because that would be awesome.
At Doom
Doomed
to
to Fail
Fail
Pod at
Pod.
Gmail. Yeah.
Yes, doomtofellpod@gmail.com. Also on the socials at Doom to Fail Pod. And I will not be using my crappy headset next week, so you'll enjoy my voice in all its buttery smoothness.
Oh my God, I can't wait.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool. We'll go ahead and cut that off.